The massive doors of the Zorvani throne chamber opened with a sound like thunder. Sergeant Ben Torres stepped into the vast hall, his boots clicking against the polished crystal floor. Above him, the ceiling stretched so high that it disappeared into shadows. Golden pillars lined the walkway, each one carved with the victories of the Zorvani Empire. Ben had seen many alien worlds during his 10 years of service, but this place was designed to make visitors feel small. The throne at the far end sat on a platform 20 feet high, reached by a staircase of black stone. Every step toward it made the person approaching seem less important. On that throne sat Empress Vela, the youngest ruler in known galactic history. At 24 years old, she controlled an empire that spanned 40 star systems. Her pale blue skin glowed softly in the chamber's light, and her silver hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. She wore robes of deep purple, the color of Zorvani royalty, with jewels that caught the light like captured stars. Around the throne room, dozens of alien courtiers watched the human delegation approach. There were tall, thin Kalari with their bird-like features, short, stocky Threnians with thick gray skin, elegant Vizari who floated slightly above the ground. All of them wore rich clothing and carried themselves with the pride of those who served a powerful empire. Ben walked at the front of the human group. Behind him came Ambassador Lisa Chen, an older woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a simple style. 2 other diplomats followed, carrying the sealed treaty documents that had brought them across 3 star systems to this meeting. The humans looked plain compared to everyone else in the room. Their dark blue uniforms were clean and pressed, but they had no jewels or fancy decorations. Ben wore the simple rank insignia of a sergeant, 3 chevrons on his sleeve. His face was calm, showing no emotion as he looked straight ahead. When they reached the base of the throne platform, Ambassador Chen stepped forward and bowed in the traditional Zorvani manner. "Your Imperial Majesty," she said, "we come bearing greetings from the United Earth Government and a proposal for mutual cooperation." Empress Vela did not respond immediately. She leaned back in her throne and studied the humans with obvious boredom. Her purple eyes moved slowly from one face to another, as if she was examining something unpleasant. "Humans," she said finally, her voice carrying clearly through the large chamber. The word sounded like an insult the way she spoke it. "I have heard about your species. You are the ones who only recently learned to travel between stars, are you not?" Ambassador Chen kept her diplomatic smile. "We may be newer to space travel than some species, Your Majesty, but we have much to offer in terms of trade and alliance." The Empress laughed, a sound like silver bells that somehow managed to be cruel. "Much to offer? What could a species that has barely left its home system possibly offer to an empire like mine?" She stood up from her throne and began walking down the steps. Her movements were graceful, like a predator approaching prey. The courtiers around the room shifted to get a better view, sensing entertainment. "Let me guess," Vela continued as she descended. "You have some basic minerals to trade? Perhaps you grow food that you think we might enjoy. Maybe you have discovered some simple technology that seems impressive to you." Ben remained perfectly still as the Empress approached. His hands stayed at his sides, his face showed no reaction to her words. He had been in dangerous situations before, had faced enemies who wanted to kill him. This was just another kind of battle. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Chen tried again, "our proposal includes sharing of scientific knowledge, cultural exchange, and mutual defense agreements. We believe both our peoples could benefit from cooperation." Vela reached the bottom of the steps and walked directly to Ben. She circled around him slowly, like a buyer examining livestock at a market. The human sergeant stood at attention, looking straight ahead, giving no sign that he noticed her inspection. "This one," the Empress said, pointing at Ben. "This is supposed to be a soldier? He looks so ordinary, so plain." She gestured to her own guards, massive Zorvani warriors in ornate armor that gleamed with energy shields. "My soldiers are bred for war. They are enhanced with the finest technology. They train from birth to be perfect fighters." She stopped in front of Ben and looked up at him. Even though she was tall for her species, the human still stood several inches taller. This seemed to annoy her. "What makes you think," she said, her voice getting louder, "that your people deserve to sit at the same table as ancient civilizations? The Zorvani Empire has existed for 3,000 years. We have conquered worlds before your species had even invented the wheel." The courtiers around the room began to murmur and chuckle. Some made comments in their own languages, clearly enjoying the show. The Empress was known for these displays. Visiting diplomats often left her throne room angry or humiliated, and it always provided entertainment for the court. Ben's jaw tightened slightly, the only sign that he was hearing her words. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, trying to redirect the conversation. Your Majesty, perhaps we could discuss the specific terms of our proposal. We have brought detailed documents that outline the benefits to both parties. But Vela was not finished. She had found her target and intended to make the most of it. She gestured broadly to the throne room, to its magnificent pillars and glowing crystals and floating platforms. Look around you, she said. This is what real civilization looks like. This is what happens when a species evolves beyond primitive thinking. We have art that makes your greatest masterpieces look like the drawings of children. We have technology that your scientists could not understand in 100 lifetimes. She walked back to Ben and looked him up and down again. And you send us soldiers like this. No special armor, no visible weapons, no enhancements that I can see. How exactly is this supposed to impress anyone? Ben continued to stare straight ahead. His breathing stayed steady and controlled. Years of military training had taught him to remain calm under pressure, to never give an enemy the satisfaction of seeing him react. The Empress seemed frustrated by his lack of response. She had expected anger or fear or some kind of emotional reaction. Instead, she got nothing but professional discipline. Your species, she continued, her voice getting sharper, fights wars with metal bullets and chemical explosives. You still use wheels on your vehicles. Your ships barely manage to travel faster than light. Your soldiers carry equipment that we would consider antiques. She gestured to one of her guards, who stepped forward and activated his weapon. Energy crackled along its surface, creating patterns of light that danced through the air. This is a modern weapon. It can cut through any armor your people have ever made. It is powered by controlled quantum reactions that your scientists have not yet discovered. The guard deactivated the weapon and stepped back. Vela turned her attention back to Ben, who had not even glanced at the display. Do you see? She asked. This is the difference between us. We are evolved. We are advanced. We are everything your species hopes to become in a few thousand years, if you manage not to destroy yourselves first. Around the room, the alien courtiers were now openly laughing. Some made jokes in their own languages. Others pointed at the humans and shook their heads in amusement. The whole situation had become a form of entertainment. Ambassador Chen's face remained diplomatic, but her eyes showed the strain of watching her escort being humiliated. She had worked for months to arrange this meeting, hoping to establish peaceful relations with the Zorvani Empire. Now it was turning into a public mockery. Empress Vela walked back up the steps toward her throne, speaking as she went. Your proposal talks about mutual defense agreements. What exactly could you defend us from? Your entire military could not stand against a single one of our battle fleets. Your weapons could not penetrate our shields. Your tactics are centuries behind ours. She reached her throne and turned around to face the humans again. From her elevated position, she looked down at them like a teacher addressing slow students. Cultural exchange? She continued. What culture could you possibly share with us? Your art is primitive. Your music is simple. Your literature deals with basic concepts that our children outgrow by the age of 10. Your philosophy has not progressed beyond questions we answered millennia ago. Ben's hands clenched slightly at his sides, then relaxed. It was such a small movement that most people in the room missed it. But he had heard every word, processed every insult, and chosen not to respond. Scientific knowledge. The Empress laughed again. You have just discovered how to split atoms for energy. We were doing that before your planet had complex life. You think space travel is an achievement? We have been traveling between galaxies for longer than your recorded history. She sat back down on her throne and arranged her robes around her. The performance was reaching its climax, and she wanted to end it with something memorable. Your people, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber, are barely evolved animals playing at civilization. You put on uniforms and pretend to be soldiers. You build ships and pretend to be explorers. You write treaties and pretend to be diplomats. She leaned forward in her throne, her purple eyes fixed on Ben. But underneath all the pretending, you are still just clever beasts who learned to use tools. You have no place among the truly civilized species of this galaxy. You have nothing to offer us except perhaps entertainment value. The throne room was completely quiet now. Even the courtiers had stopped laughing, sensing that something had changed in the atmosphere. Ambassador Chen stood frozen, her diplomatic training warring with her human dignity. Empress Vela delivered her final words with perfect clarity. The only reason I agreed to this meeting was curiosity. I wanted to see what the newest primitive species looked like when they tried to play with the adults. Now I have seen enough. She waved her hand dismissively. Take your proposal and return to your little world. Come back in a few thousand years when you have actually accomplished something worthy of our attention. Until then, stop wasting the time of your betters. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. The insult hung in the air like a physical thing, waiting for some kind of response. Ben Torres looked directly at Empress Vela for the first time since entering the throne room. His brown eyes met her purple ones across the vast chamber. For a moment, something passed between them. Not anger, not fear, but something else entirely. Then Ben raised his right hand to his forehead in a perfect military salute. He held it for exactly 3 seconds, as regulations required. He lowered his hand back to his side with precise movements. Without saying a single word, he turned on his heel and began walking toward the massive doors at the far end of the chamber. His boots clicked against the crystal floor in a steady rhythm. He did not look back. He did not hesitate. He simply left. Ambassador Chen and the other diplomats hurried to follow him, their own faces showing shock at this breach of diplomatic protocol. No one left the presence of the Empress without permission. No one turned their back on her. No one walked away in the middle of a royal audience. But Ben Torres did exactly that. The massive doors closed behind the human delegation, with the same thunderous sound they had made when opening. The throne room remained silent for long seconds after the humans were gone. Empress Vela sat on her throne, staring at the doors through which the human soldier had just walked. She had expected anger. She had expected pleading. She had expected some kind of emotional outburst that would prove her point about human primitiveness. Instead, she had received perfect military discipline, a respectful salute, and absolute silence. For the first time in her 24 years, the Empress of the Zorvani Empire found herself completely speechless. The throne room remained silent for several minutes after the humans left. Empress Vela sat motionless on her throne, staring at the massive doors that had closed behind Sergeant Ben Torres. Around her, the courtiers shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what had just happened. Finally, one of her advisors, a tall Kalari named Zix, approached the throne platform. His bird-like features showed confusion as he bowed low. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "shall we prepare a response to the human proposal? Should we send word that their delegation has been rejected?" Vela did not answer immediately. She was still thinking about the way the human soldier had looked at her before he left. There had been no anger in his eyes, no hurt, no fear, just a kind of calm acceptance that she found disturbing. "No," she said finally, "not yet. Leave me alone for now." The courtiers exchanged glances but obeyed. They filed out of the throne room in small groups, whispering among themselves about the strange ending to what should have been an entertaining diplomatic failure. Soon Vela was alone in the vast chamber. She stood up from her throne and walked down the steps to the crystal floor. The throne room felt different when it was empty. Without the courtiers and their laughter, without the entertainment of humiliating visitors, it was just a large, cold space filled with symbols of power. Vela had been ruling the Zorvani Empire for 3 years, ever since her father died in a shuttle accident. She had been trained for leadership from birth, educated by the finest teachers, given access to all the knowledge and technology her civilization had accumulated over 3 millennia. But she had never encountered someone who simply walked away from her. Every other species that had come before her throne had reacted predictably. The proud ones got angry and made threats they could not back up. The weak ones begged for mercy or tried to buy favor with gifts. The clever ones attempted to argue or negotiate their way out of her insults. The human had done none of these things. He had listened to every word she said, absorbed every insult, and then simply left. It was not the reaction of someone who was defeated or afraid. It was the reaction of someone who had chosen not to engage. That choice bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Vela walked to her private chambers behind the throne room. The walls were covered with screens that could access any information in the Empire's vast databases. Normally, she used them to review reports from her governors or study economic data from the various worlds under her control. Tonight, she had a different purpose. She activated the main screen and accessed the Galactic Information Network. Within moments, she was looking at files about the human species and their recent entry into interstellar politics. Most of it was basic information she already knew. Humans had achieved faster than light travel only 50 years ago. Their technology was indeed primitive compared to most spacefaring civilizations. Their military used simple kinetic weapons and basic energy shields. But as she dug deeper into the files, she found more specific information about human military service records. The Galactic Network kept detailed files on all military personnel from member species, partly for security reasons and partly for diplomatic reference. She entered the name she had heard the ambassador use: Sergeant Ben Torres, Human Defense Force. The file that appeared on her screen was longer than she had expected. Ben Torres had been in military service for 10 years. He had served on 12 different worlds and participated in 43 separate missions. His record showed commendations for bravery, leadership, and what humans called service above and beyond the call of duty. Vela scrolled through the mission reports, expecting to find the usual military activities: patrol duties, training exercises, minor conflicts with pirates or smugglers. What she found instead made her sit down in surprise. The first major entry was from 6 years ago. Ben Torres had been part of a humanitarian mission to Kalari Prime when a massive plasma storm hit the planet's northern continent. The storm had knocked out all power systems and threatened to kill thousands of Kalari refugees who were sheltering in temporary camps. According to the report, Torres had volunteered to lead an evacuation team into the storm zone. Plasma storms were extremely dangerous, capable of melting metal and causing severe radiation poisoning. Most species avoided them completely. Even with protective gear, exposure for more than a few hours could be fatal. Torres had spent 18 hours in the storm zone, making multiple trips to guide Kalari families to safety. On his final trip, part of a shelter collapsed on him, trapping his left arm under a burning support beam. Rather than wait for rescue, he had freed himself by cutting off his own arm with an emergency blade. The report stated that he had continued evacuating refugees for another 2 hours before finally accepting medical treatment. His actions had saved over 300 Kalari lives. Bella stared at the screen in disbelief. She looked at the date again to make sure she was reading correctly. This had happened only 2 years after humans first made contact with other species. Torres would have been very young, probably not much older than she was now. She scrolled down to find more entries. There were rescue missions on mining worlds when equipment failures trapped workers underground. There were relief operations after natural disasters. There were peacekeeping missions in disputed territories where Torres had negotiated truces between fighting factions. In every case, the reports showed the same pattern. Torres volunteered for the most dangerous assignments. He put the safety of alien civilians ahead of his own welfare. He completed missions that other soldiers had considered impossible. One report particularly caught her attention. It was from a mission on Visari Station, where a terrorist group had taken hostages from multiple species. The terrorists had demanded that all non-Visari beings leave the station permanently. They had threatened to kill one hostage every hour until their demands were met. Torres had volunteered to go in as a negotiator. The report noted that he had learned basic Visari language specifically for this mission, studying for 3 straight days to prepare. During the negotiations, he had convinced the terrorists that their fight was with governments and policies, not with innocent civilians. The standoff had lasted 14 hours. Torres had talked the terrorists into releasing the hostages one by one, offering himself as a replacement to ensure the releases continued. In the end, he had been the only remaining hostage when security forces were finally able to move in safely. The terrorists had been captured without any loss of life. The report credited Torres with saving 47 beings from 8 different species. Vela found herself reading more carefully now, paying attention to details she had missed before. In mission after mission, Torres had chosen to help alien species, even when it put him at personal risk. There were commendations from Kalari commanders, thank you letters from Thranian families, and official recognition from the Visari government. She found records of Torres learning languages, studying alien cultures and adapting human tactics to work better with non-human allies. He had clearly spent years trying to understand other species rather than dismiss them. The most recent entry in his file was from just 3 months ago. Torres had requested transfer to diplomatic escort duty. The reason given was simple. Sergeant Torres believes that peaceful cooperation between species offers the best hope for galactic stability and prosperity. Bella sat back in her chair and stared at the screen. This was not the record of a primitive soldier from a backward species. This was the record of someone who had spent years proving that humans could be valuable allies and trusted partners. She thought about the way she had treated him in the throne room. She had called his people barely evolved animals playing at civilization. She had mocked their technology, their culture, their entire way of life. She had done it in front of dozens of witnesses, making sure the humiliation was as public as possible, and he had listened to all of it without saying a word. Now she understood why. Torres had not remained silent because he was weak or because he had no answer to her insults. He had remained silent because he was strong enough to choose not to destroy her with the truth. He could have told her about the Kalari refugees. He could have described the terror attacks he had stopped or the lives he had saved. He could have listed every commendation, every thank you letter, every official recognition he had received from the species she claimed were superior to humans. Instead, he had chosen to walk away in dignity. Vela continued reading through the files. Finding more details about human military culture, she learned about their codes of honor, their emphasis on protecting civilians, their tradition of voluntary service. She read about human soldiers who had died saving alien civilians, human medics who had treated wounded enemies, human engineers who had shared their technology freely to help rebuild worlds devastated by war. The picture that emerged was not of a primitive species trying to pretend they belonged among civilized beings. It was of a young species that had quickly learned the value of cooperation and sacrifice for the greater good. She found herself comparing human military records to those of her own people. Zorvani soldiers were indeed bred for war, enhanced with the finest technology, trained from birth to be perfect fighters. But their missions were focused on conquest and control. They fought to expand the empire, to maintain order through strength, to ensure that Zorvani interest came first. Human soldiers seemed to fight for different reasons. They fought to protect others, to preserve peace, to build bridges between different species. Their equipment might be simpler, but their goals were more complex. Vela spent the entire night reading through files about human military service, human diplomacy, human culture. She accessed reports from other species about their interactions with humans. What she found challenged everything she had believed about the newest members of the galactic community. The Kalari praised human reliability and honesty in trade negotiations. The Threnians noted human creativity in solving technical problems. The Visari admired human willingness to learn from other cultures rather than impose their own values. Even species that had initially been suspicious of humans had come to respect them. A report from the Andromedans, who were known for their careful judgment, described humans as a species with great potential for positive contributions to galactic civilization. As dawn light began to filter through the crystal windows of her chambers, Vela finally understood what had happened in her throne room the night before. She had expected to demonstrate the superiority of her empire by humiliating a representative of an inferior species. Instead, she had revealed her own insecurity and cruelty to someone who had spent years proving his worth through service to others. Torres had not walked away because he was defeated. He had walked away because he was disappointed. He had come to her world hoping to build a bridge between their species. He had probably read about Zorvani history and culture, just as she had now read about human achievements. He had likely spent time preparing for this diplomatic mission, learning proper protocols and trying to understand Zorvani values, and she had repaid his efforts with public humiliation and personal insults. The worst part was that she had done it in front of her entire court. Every alien species with representation in her government had witnessed her behavior. Word would spread throughout the empire about how the young Empress had treated a human diplomat. Bella realized that her actions had damaged more than just the possibility of an alliance with humanity. She had shown her own people that she was capable of petty cruelty, that she valued entertainment over diplomacy, that she was willing to insult guests who had come in good faith. That was not the kind of leader her empire needed. That was not the kind of person she wanted to be. She stood up from her chair and walked to the window that overlooked the capital city of her empire. Millions of beings from dozens of species lived and worked in the sprawling metropolis below. The Zorvani Empire had grown powerful by conquering other worlds, but it had remained stable by learning to govern diverse populations fairly. Her father had taught her that true strength came not from the ability to defeat others, but from the wisdom to unite them toward common goals. She had forgotten that lesson in her eagerness to prove her own superiority. Vela activated her personal communication system and sent a message to her secretary. She requested the contact information for the human delegation and asked for it to be provided immediately. Regardless of the early hour, within minutes, she had the communication frequency for Ambassador Chen's ship. She opened a secure channel and waited for a response. The screen flickered to life, showing Ambassador Chen sitting in what appeared to be a small conference room. The older woman looked tired, as if she had not slept well. Behind her, Vela could see other members of the human delegation working at computers, probably preparing their departure. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Chen said, bowing slightly even though she was clearly surprised by the call. "I was not expecting to hear from you this morning." Vela took a deep breath. What she was about to do went against every tradition of imperial protocol. Zorvani rulers did not apologize to members of other species. They did not admit mistakes. They certainly did not show weakness by acknowledging that they had behaved badly. But Torres had shown her a different kind of strength the night before. He had demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do was choose to be better than the situation demanded. "Ambassador Chen," Vela said carefully, "I am calling to offer an official apology for my behavior during yesterday's audience. My treatment of your delegation, and particularly of Sergeant Torres, was inappropriate and unworthy of my position." The ambassador's eyes widened in surprise. Behind her, Vela could see other humans stopping their work to listen to the conversation. "I have spent the night reviewing information about your species and your military traditions," Vela continued. "I have learned things that I should have known before agreeing to meet with your delegation. I allowed my own prejudices to cloud my judgment, and I behaved in a manner that brought shame to my empire." Ambassador Chen remained silent, clearly uncertain how to respond to such an unexpected development. "If Sergeant Torres is willing," Vela said, "I would like to request his presence at a private meeting this afternoon. I believe we have much to discuss regarding the proposal your government has sent, and I would appreciate his insights as someone who has worked extensively with multiple alien species." She paused, then added, "I understand if he chooses not to accept this invitation. I have given him no reason to trust that he would be treated with the respect he deserves." Ambassador Chen glanced off screen, apparently communicating with someone else in the room. When she looked back at Vela, her expression had softened slightly. "Your Majesty," she said, "I will certainly convey your invitation to Sergeant Torres. I believe he will be willing to meet with you, though I cannot speak for him." "Thank you," Vela said. "Please inform him that this meeting will be conducted according to human diplomatic protocols, in recognition of my failure to show proper respect during our previous encounter." After ending the communication, Vela sat alone in her chambers and wondered what she would say to the human soldier when he returned. She had spent years being trained to project strength and authority, to never show doubt or uncertainty. Now she would have to do something much more difficult. She would have to admit that she had been wrong, and ask for a chance to begin again. Outside her window, the capital city was waking up to a new day. Somewhere among those millions of beings, there were probably others who had heard about the previous night's events. Some would be disappointed in their young Empress. Some would be waiting to see what she would do. Next, Vela realized that the most important audience for her next actions would not be her courtiers or her advisors or even the human delegation. It would be herself. The woman she chose to be in that meeting with Sergeant Torres would determine what kind of leader she became and what kind of empire she would leave behind.